In this video, I want to talk about name numerology as it appears in Judaism, in the Old Testament, in the New Testament, in Hindu Vedic name numerology, and Japanese, Chinese name numerology. And also this practice allegedly originally comes from Kemet, which was the greatest empire of Africa. And as we know today, so far as we know, no one black practices this anymore. And if they do practice it, they're not publicly making the classes available to their own people. They're not doing it if they retain any of it at all. And the catastrophic results of stopping the practice, it shows, but I may get into that at another time. So anyhow, now in the Bible, in the book of Bereshit, which is the Hebrew word for the book of Genesis, it says that Adam and Ava, the first man and the first woman, it says that they were given a commission to name all creatures, and they had to set about to do the hard work of naming every animal in existence, every living thing. And this may not seem like a really big deal. People are like, oh, okay, it's just a fairy tale. But when you look at the science of name numerology and you look at the high-level advanced sites that can give you an ultra-personal, ultra-detailed description of people you've known in the past and people you know in the present based solely on numerology of names and nothing more than that, then it becomes very, very obvious the great power that lies in using a name to affect a person's destiny, and of course abusing that power, giving a person or a creature a disharmonious name with intent to fuck up their destiny and their purpose on the earth. Of course, there's a karma for that, whether the person or group of people knows it or not. There's a big karma for that. But anyway, so the first man and the first woman, they're ordered to learn how to name all creatures. That means they were ordered to affect the destiny of all living things, because when you name a living thing, you are affecting its destiny at a very, very deep level, for better or for worse. All the good and the bad in their destiny, all the good and the bad in their health, it can be wrapped up in whatever you choose to name them. And obviously humanity is not very good at this, and it shows in the state of our world. Here in 2022, major rivers went bone dry with the sand and the rocks exposed in multiple nations across the earth this year alone. Even the Mississippi River, that's like an ocean that typically floods every year, this year, the Mississippi, part of it went bone dry with the rocks showing at the bottom and the sand. The Yangtze River in China, the Euphrates River of prophecy in the Middle East, same thing. So everything is kind of slowly coming to a head on a level that most of society, unfortunately, still doesn't really understand yet. They don't understand that when you are a higher level, evolved, ascended being, a human, certain lifestyles and certain habits are not compatible with an ascended, higher level human lifestyle, and our species is very quickly getting to a point of being forced to learn this lesson in a very hard way just through the sheer consequences of their own actions. But that's enough. I'm not going to say any more about that. So when we look at, I've brought up how the New Testament mentions name and numerology. How Bereshit, Genesis, in the Old Testament mentions name numerology. And in the New Testament, in the book of Revelation, it says the number of the name of the beast is 666. And throughout history, we've had multiple people who have mass murdered Jews and blocked the eastern gate of the temple. And we have a lot of people with that throughout history who have had that 666 English gematria name value. And most of them have been either white or Arab, who, Arabs used to be legally classified as white at one time. So we don't really have a composite list of the many antichrists that Yeshua talked about, because throughout history, most of the people with the 666 English gematria name values who have done the most damage against the Hebrews, they've been white people or they've been Arabs, and that's why we don't have a list to know who they are, because Yeshua did say in the New Testament that there would be many antichrists. And the first most obvious one was Antiochus, whose name yields 606 in English gematria. And he fulfilled the prophecy of Daniel by sacrificing a pig in the temple and declaring himself God. And he probably thought it was okay to do that because in Nordic culture, when you want to make a sacrifice to the Most High God, Nordic people, they'll sacrifice a pig instead of a human being a lot of times. So that's probably why Antiochus thought it was okay to sacrifice a pig in the temple and declare himself God. And then he found out the hard way that he was wrong. He died a slow and painful and very, very, very ugly death. I mean, he just rotted and fell to pieces. He had maggots crawling in his flesh. Antiochus, his death was ugly, to make it very clear, like, no, it's not okay to do the Nordic sacrifice to the Most High God by offering a pig instead of a human being in the temple. And if he had offered a human instead of a pig, it would have been the same result, because there's boundary standards and expectations that Antiochus did not want to observe. And so he found out some shit the hard way. So with that said, with this man with the 606 English gematria name value, who fulfilled the prophecy of Daniel by sacrificing a pig in the temple and declaring himself God, he also mass murdered a lot of the Jews. His people mass murdered a lot of the Jews in the Masada rebellion 70 years after Yeshua was crucified. That's when most of the Jews were mass murdered. But the Lemba tribe Africans, the Romans actually helped them to return to South Africa while everybody else was getting mass murdered in the Masada rebellion. And see, that looks kind of suspicious to me, because Lemba tribe people, they did not acknowledge Yeshua. They did not accept Yeshua. They were rejecting Yeshua while he was getting crucified, just like everybody else. But yet, for some strange reason, they got a free pass to be transported to South Africa. Why? I'm not going to speculate on that right now, but I'm just wondering why. I'll probably be speculating on that for a while. But anyway, moving forward. Antiochus with the 606 gematria for his name. That's the dude who fulfilled the prophecy of the beast. And the many antichrists that Yeshua talked about have been many other people laying the groundwork on that same level for that same kind of activity. Where there's been many antichrists like Antiochus with the 606 or 666 English gematria name values, and we don't have their full history. We don't have who they've been in the past and who they are now currently, and how they're setting up our world. We don't have a full roadmap for that because most of them have been white or Arab, and I'm pretty sure, there's some other stuff going on that I just haven't really fished out just yet, but that's all I'm gonna say. And they've already gathered with the leaders of all the religions on the planet to make a new 10 Commandments, and they're doing a lot of fuckery and sneaky shit. So with that to say, and yes, a lot of the Arabs involved in the new Chrislam one world religion, the English gematria values for their first and second name spelled correctly in English, it'll give you 666 or 606. The Imam who signed an agreement with the Pope to create the Chrislam one world religion, I believe the Imam's first and second name spelled correctly in English gives a value of 606 in English gematria, if I recall correctly. That's the current Muslim Imam. And also Recep Erdogan, who's trying to brand himself as a peacemaker for Ukraine, because he bought bombs from Russia in secret. This guy, the English gematria value for his name is 666, and who gave him money to do this shit? The European Union gave Recep Erdogan money to do this shit, Mr. 666 English gematria value. And the European Union, who gave him the money to do this shit in Ukraine, okay, they were founded by a Frenchman whose English gematria name value yields 606. And they were one unit composed of 10 nations. And Recep Erdogan, who's working on resurrecting the Ottoman Caliphate that blocked the east gate of the Jerusalem temple, he's trying to resurrect a 10-nation caliphate, but the money for it comes from the 10-nation European Union, founded by a European man whose English name gematria value yields 606. And when we take a closer look at Recep Erdogan, whose English gematria name value yields 666 for his first and last name spelled correctly, again, he's trying to resurrect the 10-nation Islamic caliphate that blocked the eastern gate of the Jerusalem temple. And Recep Erdogan's nation, Turkey, it has a city in it called Pergamum. Okay, and Pergamum is in New Testament prophecy. It says Pergamum is the throne of Satan. It says Pergamum is where Satan lives and rules from. And that is the nation that Recep Erdogan rules. In the English gematria for his name is 666. His nation's also the home of the altar to make sacrifices to Zeus. The 7 churches in the book of Revelation, those are the 7 churches in Turkey. Recep Erdogan, whose English gematria name value is 666, like I said, he was called in as a peacemaker between Russia and Ukraine because he purchased bombs from Russia. And the Ukrainians and Russians together, they did something that was like the satanic version of the sacrifice of two animals. But I'm not going to get into that in this video. I'll probably get into that in a different video, because that's called controlled opposition, where your power base operates from within the people being victimized, and your power base also operates within their aggressors as well. That's called controlled opposition. And a lot of people, they don't really understand how controlled opposition works, where, another faction, they look like you're their enemies, but really, they're not really truly your enemies. They work for you. You have a hand in the opposition itself. That's one of the oldest political moves in the game. That's what's going on with Ukraine and Ukrainians, who are also children of Turkey, because they were part of the caliphate at one time, and a lot of them came here to Ohio. Why? Because they were part of the caliphate at one time. There are spirits. There's spirits and ancestors at work through these people, even if they're not aware of it themselves. This is a whole thing where there's a net spread out across many ethnic groups across the whole world on a level that a lot of people are not aware of, because they don't know the history of how these Turkmen have infiltrated bloodlines all over the world, especially Latinos. The white Latinos, especially them. But anyway, getting back to the point, in addition to Recep Erdogan, who has English Gematria name value 666, and also the current Muslim Imam, whose English Gematria value name is 606, with him signing in an agreement with the Pope to create the Chrislam one world religion together with all faiths. What these guys also did is they also signed an agreement with Russia to rebuild the Temple of Baal, which is dedicated to group sex rituals and burning children alive inside a golden bull. And these arches of Baal, they've been erected all throughout the Muslim Islamic countries. They've been erected all throughout Europe, and we even have 2 of them here in America. And they're the European contribution to the Middle Eastern child sacrifice temple of Baal. And child sacrifice has always been a part of American culture. It's just the difference is that now it's just white people who's in charge of a lot of the sacrificing of adults and children. Instead of indigenous American people being in charge of the killing, now it's white people in charge of it. It's really the only difference. This is an international culture. This is the sin of the Amorites that never fully died, never fully went away. This is the sin of the Amorites in the Bible. And when archaeologists did digging in Amorite territory, they found a lot of dead children, and all of them were females. There's dead little girls. Some of them were infants cut into pieces and stuffed in jars. Some of them were, like little girls aged 10 through 9. When indigenous American people were doing it, they were sacrificing teen girls and adults too, instead of just doing it to the children. This is the sin of the Amorites. When they're ready to do human sacrifice and mass murder, it's going to be mostly the women and the children, especially the girl children, dying. That's how this thing worked with the Amorites in the Middle East. It's how it worked in the Temple of Baal. It's how it worked in South America. It's how it worked in every single nation all over this entire planet, where you see mounds and pyramids. Okay, that's the sin of the Amorites in the Bible. And the Hebrew God, when he commissions Abraham to birth a nation, he tells Abraham, like, hey, your people are going to get ignored for a couple hundred years. While you grow in numbers, you're going to get ignored. Your other people are going to enslave you and oppress you and bully you. But you're going to return to your home. Your children will return to your homeland because the sin of the Amorites is not yet complete. And what's the sin of the Amorites? This international culture of child sacrifice that all the 666 English Gematria name value Muslims are bringing back in Islamic and European nations. They're returning it. And there's probably a lot of people of color doing it too. It's just not talked about and not advertised. They're probably doing it too because there's a popular black occultist on his channel, Bobby Hemmett. He's talking about a golden calf, golden bull, and how a lot of these white people and occultists all over the world are still sacrificing people for power. And Bobby Hemmett and a lot of also some indigenous black people, including the women, they're perfectly okay with that. And of course they'd be okay with that because they don't know that if you're one of the more beautiful, more attractive women, you're also more likely to be murdered as a sacrifice. See, these women, they think, oh, I'm a bad bitch. I got it. I can have any man I want. These other women, they're going to serve me. These other women are going to die. That's probably what they're thinking. But because they maybe don't know their history, they maybe don't know their culture, they don't understand that their chances of getting killed in a ritual is a whole lot higher if they're one of the prettier, more attractive women. So, the sin of the Amorites and all these Muslims with the 666 or the 606 name Gematria values, it's all connected. It never went away. It never went anywhere. It's just, it didn't go anywhere. White people, even the Celtic Druids in Europe were doing these things. Well, white people have always done it. Native Americans have always done it. Hindus have always done it. Asians, Middle Eastern people, Africans, they've always done this shit. The difference is the change in how they've gone about doing it. And with these arches of triumph from the Temple of Baal being erected all over the planet by Europeans, and with these 666 and 606 Muslim leaders rebuilding the Temple of Baal, it's about reintroducing the culture of human sacrifice. Like, everything is kind of connected in a way that's a little confusing and a little hard for a lot of people to understand. And a lot of people don't understand that this situation with the number of the name of the beast and with multiple generations laying the groundwork, they don't understand how the spirits of these people's ancestors and how the spirits from their churches or synagogues or shamanistic rituals or whatever, they don't understand how they play a role. And I understand that the world is overpopulated, but I also understand that they're blaming a lot of the women from ethnic groups that are smaller and not doing most of the overpopulating. See, with the culture of Baal, the international culture of these types of spirits, what they do is they tell people, be free and be fruitful and multiply. You don't have to have any standards, boundaries, or expectations on your sex life or your family size or any of that. No one can tell you what to do. You're an adult. That's what they say. But Then when it comes time to decide who they're going to send to die on a battlefield or who they're going to kidnap in murder in secret, which includes children murdered in foster care, which includes Indian children filling up mass graves all through America and Canada. When it comes time for them to decide who's supposed to die, they have been eliminating a lot of the women who are not the root of the problem. A lot of times, women and children from the bloodlines that's not doing most of the overpopulating, like Black American women. American Black women are not doing most of the overpopulating in America. And whose children get selected the most for going into foster care and getting gay raped by men if they're a little boy, or getting killed in foster care, is Black women. Their children's overrepresented for death, broken bones, and gay rape of the boys in foster care. They're overrepresented for that, even though they're not the ones doing the overpopulating. Black women tend to be overrepresented in deaths in hospitals while giving birth, even though they're a very, very small portion of America's population. Native American women from the reservations, they are a super tiny percentage of the population, and their kids tend to be overrepresented for deaths in foster care, broken bones in foster care, and gay rape of their sons in foster care. You know, there's a pattern here where consistently across the board, the Black women who have ancestors from here and the reservation women who have ancestors from here, they've been overrepresented for social ostracism, overrepresented for having their men marrying out to other groups and their men being euthanized to force all of us to share. You know, American Black women and reservation women who have ancestors from here, we've been overrepresented for that. But women from Africa who don't have any ancestry here, they have not been overrepresented for that. Their kids have not been targeted at higher rates for that. The imported African women, with the imported Latino women, who a lot of times are 50 to 75% European in ancestry, they have not been overrepresented for a lot of this stuff with the women and kids. So what I'm trying to say is, when you have people who are declaring false peace, they're declaring a false freedom by telling people they can do whatever the fuck they want to do socially and sexually and not observe any level of standards. The people who do that and who's preaching all the mandatory polygamy and, you know, mass murdering, mass incarcerating men to make their families more comfortable here, these types of people, they're murdering a lot of kids, murdering a lot of mothers, and financially oppressing a lot of women and kids in secret, who's not the root of most of the fucking problems. This is why the culture of Baal, the culture of Islam, the culture of Catholicism, you know, these are not separate cultures. It's all one operation that fits together like a hand in a glove. And a lot of these people, including the Latinos, a lot of them are the descendants of Turkmen, which Turkey is the Pergamum in the New Testament prophecy, which is referred to as the throne of Satan, where saying, hey, you know, mass murdering, mass incarcerating, killing the moms who give birth from the bloodlines that don't overpopulate as much, you know, kidnapping the kids, breaking their bones, killing them, raping them, especially the boys from the bloodlines that's doing the least amount of overpopulating. That is the culture from Turkey, from Pergamum, and the ancestral spirits from Turkey, from Pergamum, from Islam. They have a whole roadmap of stuff laid out where they have a whole campaign being worked out through their children from the Islamic nations, through their children from Ukraine, through their children from Spain and Portugal and many different places. They have a whole roadmap laid out. And they're declaring peace and they're declaring world unity because they've infiltrated a lot of families all over the planet. So they can continue saying, hey, you're just like us. There's no difference. We all need this mandatory polygamy thing, and we don't need to observe standards, boundaries, and expectations. They're saying, hey, we don't need to selectively breed to favor the men who don't go bald in old age because they're hormonally calmer. They're saying we don't need to do none of that shit. You just need to follow us because, like I said, they've infiltrated most families all over the planet. And even in Africa, they had an Arab slave trade that lasted 1,300 years. So Black people at this point are so far gone and really a lot of times adversarial to a message like the types of messages that I've been trying to bring about favoring the hormonally calmer men who don't go bald in old age. Black people tend to be adversarial to that a lot of times and tend to want to promote mandatory polygamy, mandatory polyamory a lot of times, and refusing to accept that mass murder and mass incarceration is needed to keep it going. A lot of Black people, they refuse to acknowledge that because they've been mixing with the bloodlines from Turkey, from Pergamum, from the throne of Satan through Islam for thousands of years. And it's to the point where they think that our people can't survive without favoring those kinds of individuals in selective breeding. They think we don't have any families left with hormonally calmer males, and that's actually just not true. And I don't even know how it would be possible to wake them up to the level of disaster that we're heading into, because we don't need a planet where almost everybody is from that type of bloodline and naturally crowding out the other families that's not, or crowding out the other families that's kind of borderline 50-50 and can easily turn away from it through choice. Like, how do we awaken people of color to this? How do we awaken white people to this? Because we're headed towards a huge disaster.